that in both cases you had national commitment, good governance, economic growth, investment in agriculture, investment in health, education, nutrition. In both cases, they did it all, and one of the bottom lines was a reduction in child malnutrition. In the Ghana case, just because Ghana is a low-income country, you mentioned HIPC. So clearly, I think the fact that the industrialized countries did increase development assistance starting with HIPC made a difference in places like Ghana. It helped with that wonderful story. Our next panelist, our last panelist, will be Mahendra Dev, who is director of the Indira Gandhi Institute of Development Research. He'll talk about India.
Yeah, I don't.
He has a subcontinent to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll be speaking about the linkages between agriculture and nutrition in India in the next 8 minutes. Also, lessons to be learned from this experience. India is odd man out. I mean, as Derek mentioned, across countries, India is growing at 8 to 9% for last 5-6 years, and also earlier it was 6 to 7% since the early 90s. But the reduction in malnutrition is very marginal. So there is a puzzle. So this puzzle leads to maybe other factors are important, maybe health, women's well-being, and other things. But one part of the puzzle is that in the role of agriculture sector, because in India, the share of agriculture in GDP is only 15%, but the share of employment in agriculture is 56%. So the livelihoods are dependent on agriculture. So what is the impact of this agriculture on nutrition is one of the important topics, and not much has been done. And IFPRI project recently done, also Derek mentioned, is tries to fill this gap. The objective is that the agriculture initiatives alone cannot reduce malnutrition, but it can play much bigger role than the present. In a vast country like India, even the states may not represent. It's difficult to look at only states are also very big, like many other countries. So one has to probably look at even at the district level. Somebody said if you look at district level, maybe this disconnect is not there between agriculture and malnutrition. Agriculture growth is about 2% to 2.5%, but across state it varies. Some are higher, 4% and thing. But the relationship shows that there is disconnect even between agriculture and malnutrition across states. But there is, if you see across states where agriculture productivity is high, like in Punjab and other states, the malnutrition has declined. And where agriculture growth is lower or productivity lower, like Madhya Pradesh or the eastern and central parts where malnutrition is high, there probably agriculture growth can improve the nutrition levels. India, as mentioned by Prime Minister yesterday and also others, that we are focusing on how to reduce this malnutrition. First, of course, agriculture policies, we are focusing on small and marginal farmers and resource poor, rain-fed agriculture. And also some of the policies on also marketing, agriculture marketing, because people are producing, but they're not getting income. For example, if you take tomatoes, the farmers get 1 rupee, but we buy in Delhi 40 rupees or so. So some kind of marketing problems are also there. And then on health factors, the public health service have to be improved in India because we have low levels of health indicators and slow progress in health also. Yesterday, Prime Minister also mentioned National Health Mission, which can improve, hopefully, the health indicators. And this other thing is the women empowerment. because this is an important factor for nutrition levels. The difference between South Asia and the African malnutrition levels, because South Asian levels are double to that of African levels. So what are the factors? Literature has shown that it's the women's well-being is one of the important factors, apart from other factors. So gender factor is very important. We have many programs for that, now women's empowerment is increasing. And also lastly, India has many programs, like Derek mentioned, the nutrition programs. We have, yesterday I talked about the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, how we have the public distribution system and the nutrition programs like ICDS, Integrated Child Development Services, midday meal schemes for a long time. But there are some lessons that can be learned from these programs, because impact of NREGA, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, yesterday I gave a presentation. It has some positive impact on nutrition levels through three pathways. One is the income effect, and the other impact on women, and also direct effects on children thing. So the evidence shows that this program is a lifeline for the poor. 68% of the participants said that it has reduced the hunger in this program, and also improved the help to cope with illness also. And thirdly, also they mentioned that it helped in sending the children to school. So in other words, it's also agriculture wages have increased, which have helped the diversifying their diets, because earlier the agriculture wages were 30 to 40 rupees in several parts of India. Now there are more than 100 rupees in several parts of India. So that has improved the incomes of the agriculture people. And also it has probably impact on agriculture productivity also, because these works can be done in small and marginal farmers, and then it can improve the productivity of these small and marginal farmers. One of the important things in this program offers lessons is that accountability. How do you do accountability of this program? One is the social audit, which is an instrument for accountability. I have given in another paper. The Andhra Pradesh experience shows that the social audit played an important role for accountability of these programs, which can be used for other programs, food security programs. Even other countries can learn from this social audit. And on the other programs, India has ICDS for a long time, since 1975, but the malnutrition levels have not increased significantly as compared to these programs. And to conclude, these programs and also agriculture have done well in some of the states as compared to some others, like Tamil Nadu Nutrition Scheme mentioned by Derek, and also the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program in Andhra Pradesh and Rajasthan has done well, and public distribution system has done in several other states. But what are the important factors? As Ghana presentation mentioned, it's basically the political commitment, and the governance and the institutions play an important role in success of these programs in these states. So, but one cannot immediately replicate, because institutions may not be there in other states in the political commitment, but one can try these kind of things. So basically, to conclude, the puzzle of India is that economic growth is high, the poverty has declined, income poverty has declined, but malnutrition levels are stubborn. I mean, they have not declined, they have declined only marginally. And the agriculture growth and the malnutrition also, there is a disconnect, although we are yet to find out what is exactly happened. What are the factors? So maybe health factors or the women's well-being, other factors are important. But even the food interventions also were there for a long time. ICDS for last 30 years, 40 years, there still malnutrition levels have not declined. So it's basically one of the big lessons is what is this puzzle about the high economic growth and the high malnutrition levels. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahendra, for covering just a huge topic in just a few minutes. And just by way of summary, I'm struck that the 3 country cases that we have heard really reinforce what Derek told us from his analysis of more country cases from the data across countries, that economic growth, especially agricultural growth, matters, that it does help to reduce malnutrition, but that targeted efforts to raise incomes and improve health and education and nutrition among poor people, that they also matter. So in the case of India, we see very spectacular economic growth, some real reduction in poverty, some reduction in malnutrition, but less than you might have hoped for, and maybe that's just partly because it's such a big country, and so there are regional disparities, but it may also be because there's been the growth in agriculture has been less than in other sectors, or in part because of weaknesses in health and women's empowerment. So let's now go to some questions, and I'd suggest let's start with just questions. So we'll get time for people to make points, and I'd like to make a little bit of time for people to talk about their own country briefly, but let's start with questions. This lady here, yep.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank the speakers for excellent presentation. My question goes to...
Why don't you say who you are?
I'm Elizabeth Madra from Uganda. My question goes to Professor Ann Latti. I wanted to know how your national food fortification program goes to scale. What did you do to motivate the private partners? Was there any leveling ground, like a mandatory policy in place?
Okay, we'll take a couple more. Question over here, this gentleman. And then you can go to her back there. Or him. Go ahead.
Myself, Dr. D.K. Madan from Punjabi University, India. First of all, I congratulate Madam Anna Latti for his excellent lecture on the agriculture sector in Ghana. No doubt, I am happy to know that Ghana has reduced extreme poverty, and the agriculture growth of Ghana has also been increased from 4% in 2000 to 6% in 2005. So that is a marvelous achievement. I just only want to know what is the present economic agriculture growth of Ghana, and how much agriculture subsidies are being given by the government in Ghana. Thank you.
Do you understand? How much agriculture subsidies are being given in Ghana? This back here? Yeah.
Thanks. They were really great presentations. Thank you all very much. Anna Taylor from DFID. I have a question for Anna about the situation in Ghana.
She's popular, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody likes Anna.
Really, really fantastic to see, what's happened and also the results that you've achieved. I was interested, though, to see the big reductions in underweight, but stunting rates still remaining quite high, and I wondered what your view was on why that was the case and what you were planning to do about that next. And then I had a question for Derek. Thanks for your presentation. I found it really interesting. I was wondering, in the points that you made about agricultural growth and the impact on underweight, to what extent there was a big range within that, and therefore whether you think there's a lot of untapped potential in terms of agricultural growth's impact on underweight if you're to do it in a more pro-nutrition way.
So let's do those first. Anna has 3 questions and Derek 1.
Well, thank you very much for the questions. I'll take the first one, which is the National Fortification Program. What we did was, it's a long process, but basically we had a National Food Fortification Alliance, okay, involving various stakeholders, especially industry. We had food industries, the groups that, because if you are talking about food fortification, it's the industries that are actually going to do it, okay, because they produce food en mass on large scale, and they are the ones who can distribute it through their channels. So we fortify oil and we fortify flour, and we have the industry that produce these goods were part of the National Food Fortification Alliance. Initially, they got some initial breaks. They were given the fortificants for free initially, but at some point, they were supposed to actually now pay for it themselves, but they could recover what they have put in through small increases in the products that they are making. I know that there are others, Ghanaians in this audience, who were actually involved in the fortification program, and I may introduce them to you. I can introduce them to you to get more information. But that alliance was really, really helpful. Everybody was on board. The companies agreed, and then we took off with it. It took a while, but a lot of initial problems. But finally, it took off, and it's now almost nationwide. Okay. Now, the second one, that's how much subsidies were given to in agriculture. I can't give you in quantitative terms how much was given, but I know that there were subsidies on fertilizers, pesticides. They also got cost reduction in terms of clearing and plowing their farms, and especially it also went to those who were producing some of not only food farmers, but also even cash crop farmers like cocoa. And yesterday you heard our president saying that, we had such an increase in cocoa production, which is one of our major cash crops in the country, because of some of these policies, agricultural policies that were put in place. So food farmers benefited, cash crop farmers also benefited, and subsequently this reflected also in income in some way. But I can't give you in quantitative terms. Now, underweight and stunting. It's easy to move underweight, but stunting is not so easy because it takes a while, and a lot of the stunting sometimes has its genesis in utero. So it started when that fetus was developing, and so when that child is born and continues to live in that same environment, it is very difficult to actually reverse it. That's why it's important. We are talking about the 1,000 days, or the window of opportunity. We must do something about it even before the woman becomes pregnant, so that effect, does not kick in. But I know that even in other countries, reversing stunting is not a matter of 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. It takes a while, for you to actually see an effect on stunting. And I believe that if we continue to do things right, maybe in the next 10 years, we will see our stunting rates coming down.
Thank you. Derek?
Yeah, thanks for your question. First of all, my results actually were for stunting, not underweight. In the full paper, I do both, and the results sometimes vary. But so in terms of exploring how the extent to which agriculture is pro-nutrition varies across countries, what I did in the paper, obviously, was to go with one strong hypothesis, which was that food matters most when you don't have enough. And so the results do show that, as I reported. So the impact of food production growth is much stronger in countries that have initially high levels of food insecurity. But I also at least thought about other hypotheses, and there are other papers in this conference on how to make agriculture more pro-nutrition, if you like. First of all, obviously, within agriculture, there's the food versus non-food distinction. And then within food, there's different crops. I'd like to tell a story that a Bangladeshi colleague of mine, Akhtar Ahmed, he did a study in the early 1990s in Bangladesh, and it was an unusual survey because they weighed the amount of food that each household member consumed. And they tracked the effect of income growth on preschooler malnutrition through its effect on household food consumption and then the intra-household distribution of food. And it was just a study of very poor villages. But one of the most interesting things is, I mean, these are very food insecure households with very undiversified diets. But even at such low levels of poverty, he found these young children leaving food on their plates. And that was quite incredible. And the explanation, he thought, well, one could be that just the disease environment is so poor that, you know, they just don't have strong appetites. But the other one was they were eating rice, which is very starchy and fills your stomach very quickly, and they weren't snacking. They were just eating 2 or 3 times a day. So adding more rice to that diet might have very little impact, maybe zero impact on malnutrition. You could even have a slight negative impact. The other one that I don't look at across countries is employment. So, in India and many other countries, agriculture is a huge employer of women, but we have very little data on women's time use. In the Tandy study that Mahendra and I are working on, we did look at the recent DHS in India and looked at whether employment had an effect on who takes care of women's children. We pervasively found that poorer families, irrespective of whether in agriculture, tend to have someone else, more likely to have someone else taking care of their children. But we need much more information on how women use their time and how that affects childcare, especially for infants under 2s. And then the other one, of course, which is quite hard to test. I mean, agriculture's effect on monetary poverty is quite different across countries. I think Brazil is an interesting example because the government's had to do a lot there to make agriculture more pro-poor because land inequality is extremely high there. It's extremely high in India as well. So one strong hypothesis, again, even in India, is that landlessness and land inequality are one of the factors that are making agriculture's impact on nutrition weaker than it should be.
Why don't you find somebody in the back who has a question for Beatrice or Mahendra, and somebody in the back over there who has a question for Beatrice or Mahendra. Can you go back there? Okay, here's one. Yeah, go ahead. But you, ma'am, miss, go ahead and find somebody. Go ahead. Here, is there a question here?
I have a question for Dr. Mahendra Dev, and I mean that's basically for India. And he did say that as you go more at a more disaggregated level from macro to state and further to district level, one does probably find a connection between agriculture growth, productivity growth, and low malnutrition. I only wanted to add a couple of things to that. That while that may be true,
but is this a question?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Is it? It is likely that the lagging districts or sub-regions are actually not going to be able to grow in the same manner in which the high growth states or regions have grown, and then there is, because they are going to be more dry land in nature, there is also a added factor of lack of potable drinking water in dry land regions. So that factor probably should also be incorporated while trying to understand the larger disconnect in the lagging districts or sub-regions within the country.
It's for you, right?
One answer or collect?
Oh yeah, is there another question back here? Can we get one for Beatrice?
This is a question to Professor Mahendra Dev. Same thing. This is actually something I had pointed out to yesterday. This disconnect between malnutrition and growth, which he referred to. He said that there is actually not such a disconnect, and areas of high agricultural growth would also have better nutrition. I'd just like to know the source of this because we don't have nutritional outcome data at disaggregated levels. So are these some specific studies that he's quoting? And just a quick question to Derek also. What is this, stunting and I want to draw this connection between stunting, undernutrition and calorie intakes versus nutritional intakes. You said that if we have increased from a low level of agriculture, you can increase the number of calories that you give to people. Will that impact on stunting? I mean, if a person or a child has adequate amount of calories, does stunting go down? Or do you need necessarily dietary diversification for stunting to go down?